Krueger. I'm the theater services manager here, so I oversee our front of house operations and all of our accessibility services here at the Denver Center for the Performing Arts. Lydia touched on a lot of things and really focused on universal design, which is where things should be, right? In a perfect world, we should all be universal design. But what we have as the foundation, the groundwork, is mostly the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 503 of the 1978 Rehabilitation Act. We're going to focus on the Americans with Disabilities Act right now. It was passed in 1990 with application starting in 1992 and was updated a little bit in 2010 with application towards 2011. And it's kind of the basis for everything at this point. The law is written by Congress, so it's full of vague phrases like undue financial burden, reasonable accommodation, right? Effective communication. Completely and totally unhelpful, because what's reasonable for you is not necessarily reasonable for you, which is not necessarily reasonable for somebody else. So it's a lot of vague, and it's outlined more and more by the lawsuits that come through. If you really want to look at it, right, our ultimate goal is don't get sued. Now, the true ultimate goal should be universal design, and everyone is welcome at all times through all things. But we'll get there, right? And it takes these steps, it takes those historical examples to get us to where we are, and it will take us those examples as we move forward from there. So, speaking about the law, Americans with Disabilities Act, it focuses on what we're going to call the prime disabilities, right? Physical, blind, low vision, deaf, hard of hearing, and doesn't really necessarily get into cognitive, because I guess in 2010 no one had cognitive disabilities. I don't know. The law, like I said, laws are by lawyers and by the government. So, all right, physical accessibility. Our venues should be physically accessible, right? We should be able to welcome folks in, whether it's a ramp over the stairs, or a temporary piece, or something. The biggest piece is you've got to have accessible seating. Now I'm going to have a couple slides here that will talk about sizes and how folks access those seats. But we need to make sure that places in which we are selecting, or the venues in which we are offering things, are accessible. The counter heights, we'll pick on the DCPA. Hopefully nobody's listening. But if you've ever been to the Bonfils, our main lobby, we've got a counter height that's high, and then we have one low counter. Right? It's the accessible height, the 36 inches, the counter that's accepted. If you've ever gone and picked up tickets at the Buell Theater, that's more of a universal design. All the counters are 36 inches high. Restroom stalls and widths, right? Restrooms, if you're accommodating, or if you have a patron who's utilizing a mobility device, they can't just go into a tiny little stall and sit and do their thing and get back up, right? They have to have room to maneuver. On here we have pictures. This doesn't have a pointer, does it?
I don't know.
Let's go with no, because I'll probably break it. We've got pictures of folks who are sitting in accessible seats utilizing mobility devices, an accessible stall in a restroom, and then an accessible counter. Paths of travel. So it's not just the physical space itself, it's how someone gets to you, right? We have buses that have who have lifts and things like that. We have ramps, hopefully, in our sidewalks. Although if you've been keeping up with Denver, there's a lawsuit that's currently been dealt with. Denver now has to fix all of their sidewalks to make them compliant. But that's fine, that's a different conversation. So it's the way in which they are approached, entered, and exits. How they get to you has to be accessible. You can't have giant ramps that are too steep. You can't have steps. You must have elevator access. You must have a ramp somewhere. You must have a way for folks to get to you. Because if your experience is accessible and you want everyone to come to you, but they can't physically get to you, they don't get to come and join you, right? So, when we talk about the widths, the minimum clear width of an accessible route is 36 inches. You'll hear that number a lot, 36 inches. If a person is utilizing a mobility device, needs to turn around an obstruction, meaning a column, a wall, a something that you have built and or that your venue comes with, then it needs to be at least 42 inches, because it's not just going around. They have to maneuver often in a square-like pattern to get around the round object that you put or that your building comes with. And then passing space is at least 60 inches, and that means that if you've got a group of folks going this way and a group of folks going this way, you need 60 inches in order to accommodate folks going both ways. That didn't sound right. Sorry. All right. We've talked about accessible approach. The location needs to be at grade, meaning that it's not sloped, it's not slanted, it's not at an angle, it's not tilted, it's not turned. It needs to be clear floor space. So for instance, being able to remove a seat that's there and have a clear space for someone to get to versus, right, I want them to sit here and I'll just do this. Great, they have enough room, but they don't, right? So you have to make sure that wherever you're having somebody who's utilizing a mobility device sit, that they have room to be there. And of course, larger dimensions. And this slide, if it'll work, gives you examples of what those sizes are. So 36 inches, as I mentioned. If you have two wheelchair spots next to each other, then it's 33 inches for one and 33 inches for the second. And of course, that's if you're pulling in, like if you're driving into a parking spot. But if you come at it from any other approach, the sizes get bigger. So we make sure that folks can maneuver around. Lines of sight. If you have somebody who's sitting and then they stand up, they're going to block somebody, right? Not necessarily a big deal if the person behind them can also stand up, and now because of the seating they can see again, but somebody who's utilizing a mobility device who may not be able to stand can't see. So your lines of sight need to be cognizant of that while you're planning this if you have physical structured seating that goes along with whatever you're producing, whatever you're bringing to light. And then companion seats. Right? Folks don't necessarily go to the theater by themselves. Often they have friends. Folks with disabilities also have friends. They'd like to come to the theater together. So you have companion seats, which are seats next to the wheelchair accessible seating locations. The biggest piece is to make sure that you have shoulder alignment, meaning if I'm utilizing a mobility device, my guests should be able to sit with their shoulders at the same place that I am. So they're not sitting up here and we have to talk like this, or they're not sitting back here, right? I should be able to talk to them just as you're able to talk to each other, sitting next to each other in these wonderful rows, right? And then of course it needs to be adjacent. Your friend should be able to sit next to you, yes? Right. So, when you're doing events, and in this case, number of seats does not necessarily mean a physical seating location. So if you're selling general admission tickets, there still needs to be some awareness for the number of accessible seats or accessible tickets that you might sell. And this is a big long list. Again, it's in the law, there's resources, this will also be online. But if you have 4 to 25 folks, you need at least one wheelchair accessible location. That doesn't include the companion, right? So that's actually technically 2.
Is it just one companion?
Is it just one companion? No, the companion, the law is ever so helpful in it that it says up to 3. So, I mean, if you take the law by the word that it is, it means that they bring a 4th friend, they're not allowed. I would say that whatever your ticket maximum is, for instance, we often do a max of 10 tickets on some of our ticket sales, then the folks who are purchasing accessible seats can also purchase up to 10 tickets. So that we're not discriminating, going, well, the law only says 3. You can have 3 friends, no more, right? So it's all part of that, so you have a consistent policy around. But a really great question. All right, who can use an accessible seating location? We talked about the medical definition, right? It's very easy. Anybody who has a disability, I can see they have a disability, right? No, not really a thing. There are lots of invisible disabilities. There are lots of folks that don't necessarily see themselves as having a disability of any kind. So, it is, I'm going to call it the obvious, right? Again, we're working with the law here. So it's folks who utilize wheelchairs and scooters. But it's also folks who are unable to climb stairs or walk long distances due to significant arthritis, severe respiratory, circulatory, or cardiac conditions. Individuals who are unable to sit in a straight back chair, who may need to get up and move around. And those folks who have a service animal that are unable to sit underneath or be seated underneath a non-accessible seating location could utilize that wheelchair accessible spot. And like everything, we want to make sure that we have the symbols. Symbols are a vast thing. You'll see them repeated in here because no one knows that you're offering this stuff that you have to offer if you don't utilize the symbol that folks are going to look for. So the accepted is our little friend here who looks like they're sitting on a chair that might be a wheel of some kind. You may have seen a more modern version of that symbol where the person is leaning forward as though they're not static, they're engaged in what's happening. Again, I'm coming from the law perspective, and the law only recognizes that symbol. So on the routes, elevators, ramps, on the seats themselves, online symbols over the seats themselves, and then what we call an attestation. So when it pops up and says, you're welcome to buy this seat, but are you certain that you need the services of this seat? And they go, yes, or they go, oops, and they back up and find a different seat. There is a policy on the law for release of wheelchair accessible seating locations, and you'll find some more in here, but basically when all non-accessible seats have been sold, or when all non-accessible seats in a particular seating section, or when all non-accessible seats in a specific price zone are sold. I told you it's a law. It's all vague. The idea behind it is that your organization or your event would pick one. You would decide that when all non-accessible seats are sold, that's when you're going to release your wheelchair accessible seating locations to the general public to purchase. Again, I'm going to pick on DCPA, but at the DCPA, we do it based on the venue itself. In the Buell Theater, most of my accessible seating locations, especially those for services offered like ASL interpretation and audio description, are in price level 4. What is the first set of tickets to sell out? Price level 4. So Hamilton goes on sale. I can't give you ticket information, but Hamilton goes on sale. Price level 4 is going to go. Does that mean that we're going to release all those seats that no one else has had an opportunity to get to? We hold on to them until the particular seating area, we choose the orchestra level of the Buell as our particular seating area, and go from there. We don't use the price version. In the space theater, we use the whole theater itself when all non-accessible seats are sold. All right, mobility aids. Mobility aid, meaning the item that the person may utilize to move around. It could be we mentioned them, a wheelchair or a scooter, any manually powered mobility aids. There's a wonderful picture here of a line of scooters and wheelchairs. We've got walkers, we've got crutches, we've got canes, we've got the knee scooter, if you've ever seen those, and Segways. I will also say golf carts, but your facility also has to be able to accommodate that. One of my favorite lawsuits regarding mobility aids is Disney. Disney said, no, you can't bring Segways in. It's unsafe. It's unsafe. It's unsafe. You cannot have Segways on our parks. And somebody sued. The court said, oh, they can. Segways are a valid way for folks to get around who aren't able to walk for long distances or things like that. So they can. Disney was able to put a speed limit for a Segway. But Segways are allowed in those parks because they are a manner in which someone engages with the world, and it's how they move around and how they get to things and experience things. So, one of my favorite topics, service animals. A service animal, redefined by the 2010 law, is a dog. It's not a cat, it's not a cow, it's not a lizard, it's not a goat, it's not a duck, not a peacock, it's not a hamster, we can keep going. It's a dog that has been individually trained to perform a specific task or tasks for a person with a disability.
Miniature pony.
Yep. I love this audience. You guys are great. Give me just a moment. I'll get around to miniature horses. In this case, we've got an image of a person utilizing a cane, a white cane with a dog that's up on its hind legs pushing the accessible button, and a dog that's handing an item in a grocery store to a patron who's utilizing a mobility device. And everyone's favorite exception to what I just said is miniature horses. Miniature horses are a accommodation. They're a gray zone within the law. Miniature horses, being smaller than a horse but larger than a dog, generally are about hip height. So if somebody has limited mobility or they might be unsteady on their feet or something like that, being able to lean onto that horse, lean onto that animal is very, very helpful. They also live longer than dogs, and they're rather adorable. Although I will admit, I've never seen one in action. I'll give you that. I saw one of the circus ones. So we have a miniature horse with a young person who has a walker. We've got a person coming off of a train who's utilizing a miniature horse. Another person who seems to be walking in a lobby to give you kind of a sizing. The person behind them has a little dog, and the person walking has a miniature horse. So, we're now allowing animals in. Are you ready? They must be under control. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that they're on a leash or on a harness. Some folks, based on their disability, are unable to hold a leash or unable to hold a harness, so they can be under vocal control, as in my dog stays with me and I can call it or I can ask it to do things and it will do those things. Now, hopefully you'll all pay attention to the news, and this is actually a really big one right now because the airlines are talking about it, right? Emotional support animals. I am by no means denying the value of an emotional support animal. I will tell you, I have a dog at home. She is the most amazing pup in the world. I come home, her entire body wags. It's not just her tail. She gives me kisses. I love it. I feel fantastic. She's not trained to do anything, really. She'd go outside. That's about the extent of this. But we've got peacocks that you've heard about in the news. We've got duck with red boots. We've got all kinds of animals that the airlines have allowed because they're, for the FAA, they have different guidelines, and if you've read the news, that's also coming under conversation about what is and is not allowed on an airplane. And that'll be interesting to watch, but for the purposes of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and for the purposes of Denver, unless you're housing people for our immersive experiences, emotional support animals are not something that you have to allow. Here's a quick comparison chart. Again, covering those things. Service animals are specifically trained, emotional support animals are not. Both of them are allowed on airplanes, accommodating handlers in restaurants, stores, movies, theaters, etc. Service animal is, an emotional support animal is not. Housing, which I just mentioned, trained to assist just one person. Service animals are, emotional support animals are not. Provides emotional comfort to more than one person, in this case. Nope. So service animals, thank you. Service animals do not, and emotional support animals do. And then certified or registered, and the answer to that is neither. There's not a law requiring a service animal to be identified or registered. In fact, if you fly on an airline, in your wonderful Sky Mall magazine, you can purchase a service animal vest for your kind friends and bring them with you. It's a lot of gray. We saw it took 20 years for them to update something in the law, so I imagine that if we ever get a registry or whatever the conversation is about registry, it's not going to happen soon. So what can you do, right? How do you tell the difference between my adorable Leia, who I need to bring with me all the time because she's just cute, and someone who needs that dog in order to engage in the world in which they live? What can you do? You can ask questions. Now, you can't say, what's your disability? Or you look broken, you must need that dog, right? That's not appropriate. What you can say is, hi, welcome, so we don't allow pets, I'm so sorry. Personal side, my service dog. Wonderful. What task does the dog perform? Remember, you're not asking what the disability is. What task does the dog perform? And they're going to say something. And you're going to believe them. My ex-husband is a military veteran. He had a service dog. She was trained to provide what's called environmental support. And after 10 years of marriage, I was fairly certain that was still the HVAC unit, right? We turn on the air, and it gets cool. We turn off the air, it gets, right? Environmental support. But really what she did was she allowed him to go out in public. And we walked around a facility, we walked in someplace new, and she took him around the pathways around the outside. And she allowed him to see where the exits were, and when it got too crowded and too congested and he started having a moment and he wasn't certain what to do, she would jump up on him so that he could focus on her, so that we could still go out and have dinner, we could still go see a show, we could still do things. That was the value that she brought. That was what she was able to do. And I don't know how many hotels we went into where people were like, oh, sure, it's a service dog. If your husband's disabled, why is he driving? We're not there yet. Like I said, we're getting there. So, the biggest piece of all of this, again, is someone's going to say something, I'm going to come in with this dog and I'm going to say it's environmental control. And you're going to go, great, welcome. Right? Perfect. So what happens? I come in with this dog and you all are sitting in the front row, I'm very sorry. You say, I have a severe allergy to dogs. How dare you allow a dog in this experience? Your organization, remember your frontline folks they better have an answer. You better have a policy for what you're going to do. Anybody think what we're going to do? We're obviously going to kick the dog out, right? Oh no, it's the other way around, isn't it? We're going to work with the patron with an allergy and move them, or have them come at a later time, or have them, I don't know, hurry through one section and come back at a later point. Allergies are not disabilities. Don't know how to tell you that. How do you handle a person with fears, right? I bring in a vicious pit bull. You are scared out of your mind. You hate dogs. What are we going to do? Kick the dog out? No. Nope, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to work with the patron and either have them come back on another date, have them wait and come back at a later time, have them go through a little faster and loop back around to whatever that experience might be. Now the next question. The animal's not actually housebroken. I have brought my Leia. She is my sweetie. She is now chewing over in the corner on the piano table leg over there. She's licking on you. She pooped over there in the corner. What do we do? She's not under control. Somebody called it. Yes, she's not under control. So you're going to approach me and go, hi. It seems that your service dog is not currently under control. If you could please handle that. I go, oh, yeah, it'll be fine. And she continues to chew on the table leg or the piano or the lick you and sit on your lap and all that stuff. What happens then? You're going to ask me to leave with that dog. But you have to have those policies in place and you have to have your staff trained. So it's the same experience no matter who walks in your door, you have the same conversation. Hi, I'm so sorry we don't accept dogs. Oh, wonderful, it's a service dog. What task does the dog perform? Great, come on in. So everybody gets the same experience so somebody can't come back to you and go, you didn't ask me, or you singled me out because I brought in a dog. The Americans with Disabilities Act talks about effective communication. You need to provide equal access using auxiliary aids and services that are available for patrons with disabilities. Who defines effective?
The judge.
The judge. That's actually a great answer. Yes. Hopefully you don't have to get that far and you can have a conversation with the patron. But in general, accepted services for folks who are deaf and hard of hearing include American Sign Language interpreters, open captioning or closed captioning on videos and things like that. While we're on this topic, I arrive, we're gonna go into Fantasyland, and I am a patron who is deaf, and I'm attending your event, and I've asked you for an ASL interpreter. Who pays for the interpreter? You do as an organization, as you are open to the public. The public can come to anything at any time, so folks with disabilities can come to anything at any time, including you as an organization providing ASL interpreters and covering the cost. Assistive listening devices that amplify whatever sounds are going on. Actors, videos, things like that that can be passed out. Looping technology. This slide gives you an example of if your capacity is 50 or less, you need 2 receivers that are assistive listening devices, and 2, in addition to those 2, so 4 total, 2 of which are hearing aid compatible, also known as a loop. Folks who are blind or have low vision, you've got audio description, where you have somebody who comes in and will describe what's going on. If you go to our national parks, they have a wonderful set of audio described devices that can be handed out, and they push a button on the thing and it describes whatever that image is or describes what's going on. We offer audio description for our performances. Braille print, which is in some areas a declining thing, in Denver a growing thing. There's a large push in Denver from the National Federation for the Blind to teach people how to read Braille. Braille's an important piece. Large print, including seats that are closer to the stage. So, I have you, I guess you're renting a space, you are now renovating everything, the path of travel, how people are getting in, you're making widths larger, right? You're doing all of this fun stuff. But who's responsible for that piece, right? How do you get the facility that you're in, or the event that you're doing, how do you make it accessible? And the legal obligation to remove barriers, which apparently is barrios, right? Or to provide the auxiliary aids and services is both on the landlord and the tenant. It's a conversation between the 2 groups to figure it out. It's decided by the lease agreement, but both are legally responsible. So by renting and by being the renter and the rentee, both of you are responsible for providing the services that we just covered in the law here. I will also jump on this. You're offering the service, right? You're open to the public, you're providing accommodations, you have these things. Now what? Well, hopefully you're going to train your staff. We cover that when it comes to service animals. Make sure you're training your staff and they know what's going on. They can answer questions, they can ask policies. Make sure the community knows, right? No one's going to come if they don't know what's going on. Utilize some of the advertising that you're already doing. If you send emails, put in that you'll provide ASL interpretation or that you have an ASL interpreted performance. Social media is another great way. The ultimate question, if you read through the law, there's no clear definition of how you provide them, right? You pre-schedule, right? I've decided that Tuesday, June 3rd is my accessible performance. We're going to do ASL interpretation, audio description, etc. Or do you wait for a request? That's something you, as each organization, is going to need to decide. It's kind of the accepted standard for 2 weeks' notice. Having said that, once you've created contacts with folks in the community, you may be able to bring that down. We can turn around a Braille print program in 3 days. Right? I can turn around ASL interpreters in about a week because we know who we're contacting in the community, they know the thing, they know the product, and they're willing to work with us. So, that was the law piece. In a beautiful transition to Reagan, some etiquette pieces, right? Not everyone wants assistance. Don't rush and help somebody. Offer to assist versus help, right? Help can often be demeaning, especially when you say it right? You look like you need help, right? Oh, can I offer you some assistance? Speak directly to the patron and not to their interpreter or their guests. And of course, language is an important piece, which Lydia included. So avoid, we'll call them outdated languages like handicapped and focus more on disability. So thank you.